One night after work, I was heading home and realized I needed to get gas. I live in a small town in the Midwest, so there was only one station between my house and where I worked. When I got there, I slowed down and pulled in next to the Bowser, probably a little too quickly, as I was in a hurry to get home to my son and let the babysitter leave. I filled up my car with gas and hurried inside to pay for it. When I got to the counter to pay the cashier though, I realized that in my hurry I'd left my wallet in my car. Feeling stupid, I quickly apologized to the cashier and went to jog back to the car to get it. When I got to the door though, a lady walking into the gas station stopped me and said something in a hushed tone I had to lean closer to her to fully hear. She told me she'd seen someone get into the back seat of my car when I'd walked inside. At first I thought she was joking, and I looked at my car and then back at her expecting to say so, but she wasn't laughing. She said with a very serious expression that when she was filling her tank, she'd seen an older guy walk out of the garden next to the gas station and get into the back of my car. I wanted to laugh it off as crazy, but then I realized I hadn't locked the car when I left it to go inside and pay, and this woman could absolutely be telling the truth for all I knew. Almost as soon as I thought that, a truck pulled out from one of the nearby Bowsers and switched its lights on, those big halogen lights for off-roading. When it swung past my vehicle, the lights flashed into the inside of my car, and for just a moment, I saw that the lady wasn't lying. In the back of my car, leaning forward as if to watch me and the lady talking, was a man's face, staring straight at me. I couldn't tell how old he was or what he looked like because of how quickly the light came and went. All I knew was that I was so shaken up by his wide eyes looking at me and wondering what his plan was for when I got back to the car that I was scared shitless. I took my phone out of my pocket to call the cops, but before I could even finish dialing 911, the back door of my car flew open and whoever was in the back seat ran off through the garden and into the night. Nowadays, whenever I get out of my car, even if it's only for a short time, I always lock it. When I was younger, around 24, I used to work as a gas station attendant at a 24-hour Shell station. All the staff there worked rotating shifts, meaning that each attendant worked 1 week of early morning shifts, 1 week of late morning to evening shifts, and 1 week of overnight shifts. It was hell on your sleep patterns because it kind of meant your body could never get used to anything, but hey, paid the bills, so I wasn't complaining. The late night shifts were my favourite. Because it wasn't as busy, there was only ever one of us on, and you kind of had free run of the place. As a female, you would think I'd be uncomfortable with being alone in the gas station for 9 hours until the girl on the early morning shift arrived. But you'd actually be surprised how well protected I felt. The station itself was like a fortress, with auto-locked automatic doors that wouldn't open for anyone between the hours of 9 PM and 5 AM, unless I pressed the door release, and the few customers we had through the night would pay for their gas through the small window to the outside. Round back, the gas station had 2 bathrooms, one for men, one for women, but they were rarely used. By far, the night shift was always the easiest in terms of actual work. There were barely any customers after around 11 o'clock, and the night would be an exercise in killing time mostly. Around midnight, I would usually do a quick once-over and tidy up, then just chill behind the counter and kill time watching YouTube videos on my phone. One particular night though, something very different happened. It was just after midnight and this old, beat-up looking car pulled into the gas station and parked. What was sort of odd at first was that it didn't pull up next to any of the pumps. Instead, it just parked to the side of the lot. The windows were super tinted and it was completely dark out, so I couldn't see into the car. After a moment, the headlights switched off and a woman climbed out of the driver's side door. My first impression as she walked over to my little window was that she looked a little shady. Her hair was super messy and her clothes looked really old and worn. Her eyes looked kinda shifty and I got bad vibes straight away. When she got to my window, she asked me to open the door so she could pick up some items that were inside the store. Because of how shady she looked, I immediately offered to just get them for her myself and she could pay at the window, but she said she wanted to look around as she wasn't sure what she needed just yet. Reluctantly, I walked over to the automatic doors and hit the release button. When she came in, she immediately said she thought she needed a new headlight globe for her car. We had a whole bunch of them in the back of the store, so I walked over to the correct shelf. This seemed weird too, because only a few moments ago, both her headlights seemed fine when she pulled up outside, but I didn't question her. Like I said, she looked really weird, so I didn't want to provoke her when I was alone in the gas station and didn't have anyone to help me if she freaked out. Instead, I just walked her over to the stand and said I'd leave her to browse for a moment. I walked back over to the counter and almost immediately she said she'd found the right headlight globe and came over to pay for it. I thought that was damn quick, but honestly I was just happy to accept the few dollars for her that the light cost so that this slightly creepy lady would leave. She paid for the light globe and thanked me, and said she was just going to quickly go to the bathroom and then she was headed home. When she said this, I didn't envy her. The bathrooms outside were always pretty gross in my opinion, like most public bathrooms are. Either way, I just wanted her out of the store, so I nodded my head fine, thanked her, and hit the button for the door release as she left. It must have only been 30 seconds after she turned the corner to go to the women's bathroom that she came back round front and knocked on the glass doors. I reluctantly opened the doors for her again, and she said that the bathroom stall was so dirty that as a customer she couldn't be expected to use it. I did my best not to let out an audible sigh, and I wanted to tell her that she should just wait till she got home to use the bathroom. But she insisted I clean up the stall for her first. Feeling annoyed, but knowing that I couldn't exactly argue, I picked up the mop and bucket from our cleaning closet and walked outside the gas station with the lady. When we got to the door of the women's bathroom, I could already smell the stench from inside and said a few silent FMLs in my head. The lady shook her head and said how gross it was, said I should just hurry up and go clean the stall so she could use the bathroom without that horrible smell. Annoyed, but telling myself I may as well get this over with, I walked into the bathroom, but I stopped almost straight away. The way the bathrooms at our gas station are set up, the sink is to your right as you first walk in, and to the left a large wall bends around at a dogleg to the actual stall. There was an overhead light that hung above the stall, which threw a little bit of dim light from around behind the wall that was directly in front of me, and there was something in that light that made my hair stand on end. In the dim light, I could see a shadow. Not particularly noticeable, but I was already a little creeped out by the lady at the door behind me, so I was feeling pretty alert. The shadow was from something behind the large wall, must have been just in front of where the stall was, and the light from above cast the shadow of what looked like a long, unmoving object around the corner. My bad feeling turned into pure terror when the shadow ever so slightly moved. I realized what I was looking at was the shadow of a person, someone who was really tall and looked like a man. Someone was standing very still right behind that wall, like they were waiting for me. The lady behind me seemed to notice my pause and piped up again, asking me what the problem was, that I should just go in and clean the stall for her. Realizing what was probably going on here, I quickly turned, made some shitty excuse about having left behind a cleaning chemical in the store, and headed back round front. I quickly buzzed my employee pass and the doors opened for me to get inside. They had only closed for a couple seconds when that weird lady came back around the front yelling, pounding on the thick glass and asking what the hell my problem was, and why I wouldn't just get in there and clean the bathroom stall. At this point I was sick of her shit and my heart was racing so fast I wasn't taking any more chances. I told her I was calling the police, then I picked up my cell phone and did just that. While I was on the phone to the cops, the lady got more aggressive and pounded harder on the doors until she gave up, walked back to her car swearing, and gunned the engine. I watched her pull out to the road, but then my heart sank and a sickening feeling washed over me as she stopped and I saw a gruff-looking man in a dark hoodie hurry over to the car and climb into the passenger side. The car pulled out onto the road and drove off. Luckily, when the police arrived, I was able to tell them we had CCTV, so with one officer I went to the back room to view the camera recordings. There were no cameras in the bathrooms, but the outside camera did show the woman pulling up in her car, getting out and coming over to the window to first talk to me. After I let her in, a few seconds passed on the camera's timestamp, and then a second person got out of the car. It was the man I saw get in as she left. After getting out, he quickly made his way around back and the camera lost sight of him. The scariest part of all this is that the cameras didn't see him again until he came back out front and climbed into the shady woman's car and they left. Meaning that the shadow I saw in the bathroom that night was most likely someone really hiding in there, waiting for me to turn the corner. Whatever their intentions were, I'm glad I don't work at that gas station anymore, and I'm off night shifts for good. I was on my way home from hanging out with an old friend who was home from college over the winter break. His family's place is right down the road from mine, so it's usually just a few minutes drive. However, I was quite low on gas. low enough that I was sure I wouldn't make it home, so I stopped at the local station between our neighborhoods to fill up. I met my friend immediately after getting off work that night, and I hadn't had anything to drink. I'm too much of an impatient guy to just wait until I'd got home, so I ran inside for a Coke to quench my thirst. It was quite late and the lot was deserted, save for the sole employee's vehicle and one customer's. I saw the two arguing about something as I entered, but I ignored them as I went to fill up my soda. As I'm doing so, the customer, an older man, approached me. "Hey, do you know how to get to the general hospital from here?" he asked me. He looked pretty dirty and smelled awful the closer he got. I thought something seemed wrong with him and he was asking for directions to the hospital after all, so I decided this wasn't someone to mess with. I gave him the most detailed directions I could to get to the hospital, which couldn't have been more than a 15-minute drive away. He told me that was what the guy behind the counter had told him, but that he didn't believe a thing that guy said. He used a racial slur when he said this, and then he told me that all he was seeing was the inside of this building. That didn't make a lot of sense to me, and I decided there was definitely something wrong with this guy. I went through my detailed directions with him again after instructing him to go out first. Apparently my directions weren't good enough for him, because then he said, "Look, I ain't from around here. Why don't you just come with me in my car and help me find it?" Thoroughly getting creeped out now, I told him I couldn't do that I couldn't leave my car here for starters, but he wasn't having it. Standing between me and the exit, the old man demanded I get in his car and direct him to the hospital. Thinking as quickly as I could, I made up a story about going into work for an overnight shift. Luckily for me, I was still wearing my name tag from earlier, and the man leaves me alone in a huff. He walks outside and back to his vehicle. I decided then to wait a few minutes for him to drive off, but he didn't. Once I got sick of waiting, I paid for my Coke and let the cashier know that the old man was bothering me and that he should keep an eye on him. As I turned to leave, the old man was staring directly at me. I whipped out my phone and pretended to have a conversation with my girlfriend as I power walked back to my vehicle. Then the old man started shouting out of his vehicle at me. Hey, come over here." By the time I made it back to my car and locked the doors, I noticed he'd gotten out of his car and was heading in my direction. I peeled the hell out of there and noticed the guy dash back into his car. I take off in the opposite direction of home and see his car tail my direction in my rearview mirror. I was pretty horrified at this point. I take the most roundabout route back home I can think of, and fortunately managed to lose him. I locked my front door right behind me and slept extremely poorly that night. That Coke was most definitely not worth whatever was going to happen to me if I'd gotten into that guy's car.